Hey guys, it's Pete from Pete from Anxiety here. Welcome into today's episode. I appreciate y'all being here so much. Let's talk about a few things real quick. The Pete vs. Anxiety Team Anxiety Facebook group. Are you a part of it? You're not? What are you waiting for? The link's down here in the description down below, or go to Facebook and search Pete vs. Anxiety. Then look for the Team Anxiety Team page and join it today. Why not? You can join and help. It'll be great. Yeah, like right now. Hurry up. Stop what you're doing. Pause this video. Go do it right now. But anyways, let's also talk about the Pete vs. Anxiety YouTube page. If you're here right now, you're probably following it most likely. If not, head on over there, subscribe. Be sure to like and comment on the videos and let me know, because all that stuff really helps, guys. I really appreciate it. And help me break the stigma that mental health is talked about enough. But anyways, guys, let's get in today's episode. I'll have a great one. Thank you so much again. And as I always say, don't ask how your day is. Ask how your mental health is today. Guys, welcome to another exciting episode of Pete vs. Anxiety, the mental health podcast breaking the stigma that mental health is not talked about enough. My guest today is a seasoned talent agent with more than 2 decades of experience in the entertainment industry. He also holds a Ph.D. in psychology from Walden University. Additionally, he's a certified hypnotist and an if I can talk today, NLP practitioner, bringing a unique blend of psychology and insight to practical expertise to his work. Please welcome the one, the only, Albert Bramante.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here.
Well, I'm glad you're here after all the technical difficulties. Why don't you lay it on everybody exactly what it is that you're doing now? You did seasoned talent agent, PhD, all that stuff, man. How did you get to there? Like, obviously, you started PhD, so give us the rundown.
Sure. Well, I started off, getting my undergrad and master's degree in psychology. And during this time, I was always interested in the performing arts industry. I took some classes, electives in college during my undergrad year in theater. I also was in the high school drama club. So I was very much interested in drama, even though I didn't necessarily want to be an actor myself. Yeah. I just loved the process of being around creative people. The creative energy is so exciting. And so right around the early 2000s, I was contemplating what I wanted to do. I definitely wanted to, pursue the PhD in psychology, but I also loved working with actors. So I, started off, doing some casting here and there, helping out with film festivals, volunteering at film festivals. And I really just, each experience I accrued several contacts of actors that I really enjoyed working with. And so, as I build up my files, I really wanted to find a way I could support them. So I decided, why don't I represent them, becoming, a talent rep. And so 2004, I started my first company. And, I've been doing that, ever since. And then 2005, I started the PhD program. And then 2015, it took me a little bit longer than a standard student of PhD student would take, but I received my PhD in 2015, 10 years ago. And so, that's sort of where I'm at now.
Yeah, that's a lot, man. That's a lot. You've been doing a lot. You've been busy. PhD. So how did you go from hypnosis to that? Is that something you use now with your practice with a lot of actors you run into?
Indirectly, I've always been, interested in the human mind. And, even when I was going to school for traditional, psychology, initially I was going to go for clinical psychology. And that's where my PhD was initially going to be in. But yeah. I became more interested in more the educational, applied aspect of it. So, towards the end of my PhD studies, I'm more pivoted towards educational. But I was always interested in, the human mind and communication. And so that's where I decided to take some classes in hypnosis and NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. And it really, I think, even reinforces, a lot of stuff I learned in traditional, in my traditional education.
Yeah. Oh, I believe it. It's just an interesting background, though. But, when you get to acting anyways, it's a lot of those guys, they have to get in the right mindset and things like that. So, the real question, though, is how's their mental health, though, for these guys? Like, some of these guys, I mean, it's got to be stressful depending on what roles they get. And then, a lot of that, I'm sure, is a lot plays in their head, doesn't it?
It really does. I mean, if you think about it, it's, there's a lot of competition. Number one, it's an overly saturated market.
Yeah.
There's so many more actors compared to the roles that are available. So
Yeah.
the constantly getting no is going to be a challenge. Being told no versus the yeses that the times they're going to get hired. So that takes a toll, and the industry is so unpredictable. That it's not like a 9 to 5 traditional job that you're guaranteed.
Yeah.
There's no guarantees here, so that after time can start to wear down, their psyche or their mind in a sense,
Yeah.
and start creating self-doubt and then of course you brought up another point of sometimes getting lost in the character too, because one of the things even when you start to physically embody a role, which is what actors start out with, but physically getting into the role, it starts to wind up mentally too, starting to creep in too after a while. Just like, for example, if you want to teach somebody confidence, one of the first things we teach them is start to act confident.
Yeah.
What does a confident person look like? Because eventually the neurology is going to copy what's going on in the outer world.
Yeah.
And that's like pure NLP right there. So, the same thing with the actors, that they start taking on these roles that are sometimes intense, and they could be, if it's theater, it could be going on for months, multiple performances a week for several months. For a film, it could be, you could be on set for a couple of months shooting this, and you're constantly in character, and then that can take a toll. I mean, unfortunately, so a lot of viewers would probably resonate with the case of Heath Ledger, for example, The Dark Knight.
Exactly.
How that role just was too intense, and I mean, I'm sure there were other things that led up to it, but I think that was the catalyst, like the breaking point for him was doing The Dark Knight.
Yeah.
And yes, on one hand, he gave us a dynamic performance, an unforgettable performance, but what cost?
Exactly. The other one too is, what's the other guy that did the Suicide Squad one? Jared Leto, his one too. Remember, he was talking about how he did all these weird things to prepare for the role, and just like I couldn't even imagine these things these guys go through, especially Heath. I'm already struggling with everything he was, and then that on top of it all.
Yeah.
Oh my God, man, we lost a great one. It was a great role, but at the same time, okay, yeah, it's a great role, but like you said. Like what does it do? That may have been the catalyst for him to just say, okay, well, that pushed him over the edge, which is, a lot of people don't think of it that way.
Right. Because if you're not in an industry, I mean, you think, okay, it's just pretending to be a role. It's much more than that, because when you start to embody it, and a lot of the traditional acting, instruction, the method acting is all about really, finding yourself in that character. So again, when you become, you're not just acting, you're becoming that character for that time of whatever you're in production, pre-production, rehearsal, and then full-on production. That sometimes you almost forget who you are at some point. Another actor, he was preparing for a serial killer, in a movie. This was years ago, and the way he prepared himself was like he separated himself from his family. He had a wife and kids, and he spent a month in a hotel. And then, in that hotel, he would spend hours a day looking at serial killer documentaries and footage.
Oh, no.
And they had crime scene photos all over the wall that he would stare at for hours just to get into the character. It got so bad that he needed to be, he had to be in therapy afterwards when the movie was over.
Oh, I believe it.
Because it's like he just, found himself starting to identify with these people, and that's not what he wanted. So that's the problem a lot with acting, and I don't know that myself personally they quite answer this, but there's got to be another way.
Yeah.
That you can still give that good performance, but have it not cost you.
Yeah. No, I agree 100% with you, because some other notable ones were like Chris Farley. He struggled a lot too. And, a lot of these other guys in the back, and you already know, Robin Williams struggled as well, and he did all those different acting roles. And I know for a lot of the roles, they got to lose weight, gain weight. I think Tom Hanks even had some issues too after a while, because if he did Castaway, there's no way he could have been normal for a little bit after that, because that poor guy had to go through so much and he was isolated for so long. I couldn't even begin to wonder the things that man was dealing with in his head at that time, just to put on that kind of role.
Yeah, and it's not only that, and also especially with well-known actors, what a lot of time they struggle with is a lot of people, the notoriety and fame is also overwhelming, because a lot of actors are introverts by nature. A lot of artists and actors are introverted. So being in the spotlight, even though they're doing it for the art, is a bit, overwhelming.
Yeah.
And a lot of people want to get close to these actors because of the roles they played, and not because of who they are personally. And that's what I think also wears down in their psyche too.
Mm-hmm.
Is like, people want to get to know them for the characters they play, not realizing that who the characters they play and who they are totally different people.
Yeah, definitely. No, I agree. Jim Carrey was one that was notable as well. He said that he didn't want to do anything that wasn't meaningful after he stopped acting. And I was like, I get it. Jim did a lot of crazy roles, like Me, Myself, and Irene. He did a lot of those stunts himself, like the things that dude put himself through just for entertainment.
Yeah, physical insane. Comedian. Yeah, it was, and that's why he had his own breakdowns too, because it was enough is enough, and that's the thing also with a lot of comedians too. Again, Robin Williams, is. There's sometimes, even though they're being lighthearted and comedic, there could be pain underneath, a lot of pain underneath.
Yeah, no, I get that completely, because you don't want a lot of people to deal with it. Some other notable people I noticed that I'm looking here is Ryan Reynolds struggles with anxiety since his teens. It says Demi Lovato was diagnosed with bipolar. Leonardo DiCaprio's on this list too. He has OCD. When it goes to say, so all these guys are famous, it doesn't mean they can't have issues in the back scene, things like that. Carrie Fisher has bipolar and battles with her addictions, things like that. And I'm not shocked, honestly, for a lot of these guys, just all that fame. I could see the OCD thing. Lady Gaga has post-traumatic stress disorder right here, saying Daniel Radcliffe, which we all know is Harry Potter. He does with severe anxiety and alcohol use disorder, which is weird because, you don't think of it. That's Harry Potter, man. And that's all they're going to see him as, Harry Potter. They're going to see him as Daniel Radcliffe. There's anything else he's done, he'll just be Harry Potter. But he's done other great movies, too. Like he's done Horns and a few other films where I thought he was really great in that, a lot of people are probably never going to see ever,
And that's a lot of pressure on them. And, a lot of them even come from, traumatic childhoods, too. Being pushed into it.
I can only imagine with Britney Spears, Justin Timberlake, and Christina Aguilera. And the reason I mentioned those three, for anybody that is not old enough to remember, they were on the show called The Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. Could you just imagine the stress they were dealing with as children, all the pressure they had to deal with until now? Now, Britney took off, Christina took off, Justin took off, And out of all three of them, Britney's the only one you really see having the most problems that we know of. Now, Christina could have issues too, and Justin, they choose not to talk about it publicly.
Right, exactly. And even with myself being an agent now, I work with a lot of even younger actors, and sometimes I'll see parents that will like, I want to get my child into acting, and sometimes I would have the meeting with the parents and the child, and I could tell whether the child wants to do this or doesn't want to do it.
Yeah.
And for me, I do work with children, but not that many, because I don't want to be responsible for indirectly, now, unless a child really wants to act and they're really good and they love it for the sake of it, then I will work with them. But if they're doing it because mom or dad wants them to do it, it's not going to work. I don't want to contribute to that.
Well, I think it's awesome, though, that you have the background to be able to identify these things, so we don't have these future Heath Ledgers or, whatever problems coming. You could at least kind of see these things ahead of time to help your clients in general, And I'm sure you see a lot of these other guys, and you're just watching them, and you're reading different signs off them while watching these movies. Like, man, these guys are struggling with things, and stuff like that. And a lot of those guys doing some of those intense roles. Like Vince Vaughn did that one with where he was in that prison or whatever, and it got pretty bad. Like, I can only imagine some of these roles, like the guys that played like the horror figures, like Robert Englund, played Freddy Krueger, and then you had Kane, who played, Jason and all that stuff and things like that. Stuff they had to do and the things they saw. There's no way that didn't take a toll on them.
Yeah, and I was also another example is the late James Gandolfini, who played Tony Soprano.
Hey, yeah.
And there was a lot of stuff written about that. He had a lot of hard days on set, the actor, because he didn't like, he was actually not really a fan of violence, and yet he had to be, a perpetrator of violence in a lot of the scenes, and that got to him. That he needed a lot of like coaching and breakdown. And a lot of people don't see that because when they see James Gandolfini, they see Tony Soprano.
Yeah,
and the actor James Gandolfini and Tony Soprano are nothing alike.
Yeah,
and that's also another thing too that adds is that people again assume your persona, and think that that's who you are, and that's not. And that's why people want to be around you, because of they want their fame to rub off on you. So that's why they will constantly hang out when they hang out with celebrities.
It's funny you say that. A lot of fame, this is maybe a little off topic, but pro wrestlers too. Think about it. The movie The Wrestler Mickey Rourke did was a really good couldn't experience to people that some of those guys don't lose their identities like that. Like you were just saying, like his character, he played the Ram. He basically, couldn't lose his personality. He was still the Ram in general. He didn't see himself as anybody else but the Ram. He was so fixated with his character that in the end, he did exactly what he would have shown. He just pretty much went to the end until he was pretty much passed away. Obviously, that's what happened after the scenes rolled credits, because he was told if he did another the Ram Jam, he'd end up actually passing away. But some of those guys get so stuck in those things. It's just like that's who they are now. Like Ric Flair's notably like that too. He's 100%. He could be anybody else other than Ric Flair with his real name. It doesn't matter. He's Ric Flair now because he's so locked into that persona. And it's hard for some of those guys to drop those things. That fame, that adrenaline rush, he'll tell you some wild stories that he's done and things that he's done. And all those guys have all them crazy stories, and they're all actors. And honestly, they're all actors. A lot of them, it's all staged. Everything is the same way. It's staged. Yeah. The mental capacity of what those guys have to deal with on a daily basis, I could only imagine. I know I listened to like Jim Cornette. He talks about the 80s, and he's talking about like people used to try and stab him coming to the crowd because they had the psychology of the thing, which you're trying to get them to believe you're such the villain character that these guys are trying to stab him coming through the crowd and things like that. It just had me insane though back then.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And, I was even reading an interview by Anthony Hopkins, who, obviously played
Hannibal Lecter. Yes.
Hannibal Lecter. And he was saying, that he, would get almost like annoying that, every time he would be out in public, people would walk up to him and start quoting Hannibal Lecter lines. Yeah. And it's like, at some point he was just like, look, I want to have dinner with my friend. I want to have, I'm at a restaurant. I want to have dinner with my family or friends. I don't want to be bothered with that right now.
Yeah.
With that.
No, I don't blame them. I mean, that's the problem. They don't have any privacy. So a lot of these guys, it's hard for them to go out, and then there's all the photography and everybody taking pictures of them all the time.
Yeah.
And, and what is another notable sports star? What is it? Michael Jordan's always noticeable as an asshole to everybody's what they say, but was he really? I think Michael was just like, hey, man, I know I'm good. I don't need you to tell me something I know. Because if you've seen the movie where they were talking about where Nike had started to pick up his shoe line, he knew from the beginning he was so great. Now, is that ego? Maybe not, because the guy could back it up. It's a different story. But they all said the same thing. It's like, they perceived him to be an asshole, but he knew he was good. But like, you couldn't approach him in public probably either. He'd be the same way. Like, hey, I'm with my family. I show a little respect, And a lot of those guys, if you walk up and like I know Hulk Hogan, when he did that reality show, Hogan Knows Best or whatever, you could see like Linda was getting upset because a lot of times people would come up to him and want to take pictures. And it's like, people didn't have common courtesy. Like, hey, listen, I know you're with your wife. Do you mind taking a quick photo or something? Like ask them. Like, hey, listen, I just want to know if it's okay. I don't want to be rude. Don't just come up there and start shouting, Hulk, Hulk, Hulk. It's like, come on, man. It's like, show a little respect for these guys.
Yeah, and that's where, like, when you hear these stories, so-and-so was, stubbing fans. I'm like, well, how were you? Were you unruly? Mm-hmm. Of course. Well, there you go. If they're out to dinner with their family, leave them be.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree.
Leave them be. And just, because again, they're off duty right now. If you think about it now.
No, I agree 100%. I don't think people think about their mental state of mind that they're in too. A lot of these guys go through all those acting roles, come out of it like we were talking about Heath, and it's like, afterwards, they just want some space, man. Like you're all over them. Oh yeah, the movie came out, then you want to crowd them, and it's like no, they need space to regroup and bring them back to reality of who they are. Because a lot of those guys, like we talked about already, man, they get deep into these roles, and it's just like they lose themselves sometimes. You know, like Ric Flair, he lost himself into Ric Flair, so now he's just Ric Flair. It doesn't matter. He's Ric Flair 24/7. Doesn't ever turn it off.
Yeah.
You know, and to those guys, it's euphoric. It's like a drug addiction almost to them. They're just getting so excited because they just love the rush of the people. But it's like, when do you worry about yourself? Like, you know, his health was deteriorating and things like that. You know, Lex Luger was another big one that was big for a while. And then, man, if you see him now, he looks horrible. That poor guy did steroids back in the 80s and things like that. And all those other kind of things, and like notable records of people doing all that stuff. But all these guys, you know, I think Kevin Nash is another interesting one too. Like he doesn't want to talk about wrestling. He has a podcast himself. And like he'll talk about a little bit of wrestling, but I like it because he talks about, you get to meet Kevin as the person, not Kevin as the wrestler. And that's all Kevin wants to be. It's just Kevin. He doesn't care about, oh, I was Diesel, I was this person, I was that person. You know, and it's all the same thing when it comes to actors. It's like, listen, Anthony Hopkins, man, done so many great roles, but you only care about Hannibal Lecter. I'm like, stop. How about appreciate the work the man's done? How about not worry about just one role? Just same thing with Daniel Radcliffe. He's done other films, and other people are just like, oh, Harry Potter. He's like, okay, I'm not for Harry Potter, bro. I'm tired of it already.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so that's part of what actors go through, and that's why this is not an easy profession. Yes, it's a lot. When you're passionate about it, great, but it's not. You know, it's not an easy business to be in, and that's. And I respect when people say like, because you know, there is a high turnover rate. You know, people like maybe will act like 5 or 10 years and then say, you know what, this is not. You know, I need to go back to a you know, regular job or a traditional job as I need to make money, because especially if you have family or, you know, other people to support, it can be a challenging experience. I respect it, but you know, the important thing is the you know, the whole mindset is really important.
So speaking mindset, Albert, do you have any advice for anybody that's trying to get acting? Anything they should work on, like for their own mental health sake? Because I know you say that, you know, it's a lot of it's real rough on them, but is there any tips you have, since you have the psychology background? Is there anything you suggest?
Well, number one, maintain a work-life balance. So, you know, while you know, acting may be your passion and you know, in your bones and what you want to do, but I would also get some outside hobbies and outside interests that have nothing to do with acting, so that it can feed your soul in a sense. Like several of my clients, you know, are fitness enthusiasts. Some of them are, you know, realtors. Some of them are work in catering. Some of them, you know, do other stuff, creative stuff on the side. They do, you know, the point is they have a work-life balance. Number one. Number two, know that because it's competitive, have at least if you're going to do this as a career, I would say have a 10 or 20-year plan minimum. Now of course you're going to need to support yourself, like, you know, so getting a survival job is probably going to be most ideal for you, because it's, especially if you're going to live in a metropolitan city like New York or LA or Atlanta, it's not cheap. So you want to, you know, definitely have a survival job. Also, a couple of things that a lot of people, misconceptions that I think, the one misconception I really want to bring up is the idea of rejection. Because I hear a lot of people tell me, oh, I wish I would want to be an actor, but I'm so afraid of all the rejection I'm going to get. And the reframe that I have with that is there's no such thing as rejection. It's just that your services are not needed today. So, because there's they can only hire one actor per role. And they sometimes are going to get hundreds of people trying out for that role, you know, whether it's submitting and then, you know, and dozens auditioning. They can only give it to one person, and it's not personal. You know, you could give a great performance, give a great audition as an actor, or even, you know, in any other profession, do a great interview, but you may ultimately you may not get the job.
Yeah.
But that has nothing to do with you. So, you know, I would say another thing is don't take it personal. It's hard, I know, but don't take it personal. You know, it's just, again, you know, when you hear the word rejection, it sounds personal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they rejected me. No, they didn't. They just, didn't hire you for this role. That's all it is. And, another thing is anytime you go on an audition, what I tell actors, as soon as the audition is over, you let it go out of your mind. Don't even focus on it anymore. Whether it's an audition or even an interview, when it's over, it's over. And move on. And the next, you should be focusing your energy on, okay, next. What's the next opportunity? Because if you dwell on it, that's going to also start catching up on you and adding to your anxiety about. Because then, we're self-critical. One of the things we're our worst critic ourselves too. So.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Me and a guest had an hour-long conversation about negative self-talk. In fact, it was very interesting to have.
Yeah.
Because we went to the neurological level of it, how they've recently discovered there's another level that actually causes that to happen. And there's a whole interview about it. But it was very fascinating to find out all these things, and just a notable thing real quick. Robin Williams, he dealt with Lewy body dementia. It says it's a neurological disorder that can cause severe psychiatric symptoms such as depression, paranoia, hallucinations. Now, could you just imagine that? Like the guy was hallucinating, doing all those different voices and things like that. Well, maybe those are actual things those are the hallucinations coming through. Is that possible? Just a quick question for you.
I think could be. I mean, this is more of an end stage diagnosis for him. Yeah. But I can tell you one thing: it's hard to live with that, and to know that there's no cure. Yeah. And I think that was also what was eating on him too, was that it's only going to decline even more now. Yeah. It's tragic what happened to him. It really is. But I think that also goes to another thing about nobody really cares so much about how these actors are doing. It's more of what can they do for us. Like Robin Williams is an entertainer, but I don't think a lot of people were checking to see how he was doing personally.
Yeah, same thing.
And really caring about it.
Well, I mean, let's think about that though. Hold on, sorry. I had something come through here. Sorry, anyways, but my thought was let's think about it. Like Chris Farley, he masked what exactly I felt. Unless people in the backseat knew about Chris's insecurities, Robin probably masked the same things too, because it's still early on. We didn't know a lot about that kind of stuff that he was dealing with. Could you just imagine telling people that you're hearing things and all these other things he was dealing with? Hey, I'm sad. A lot of people's first reaction to that is, oh, well, just cheer up. You know what I mean? Like if people are so off about it, and you probably heard all these different things.
Cheer up, get over it, snap out of it. That's not going to happen. I think that's almost like if you're telling somebody to snap out of it or cheer up is almost like putting gasoline on the fire. You're making it worse.
Y'all listen exactly what he just said. Albert just said, if you tell somebody to cheer up that has depression, you're just adding fuel to the fire. Albert, thank you so much for making that point, because I feel like people don't know enough about these things. And that's the whole reason this podcast even exists, is just to have ththese conversations, have people such as yourself come on and make such great statements such as that.
Yeah. Well, and that was something I just knew from experience. We're working with that. Telling someone to snap out of it or cheer up is, again, backfires. I mean, just like, not to sound stereotypical, but telling especially a female to calm down, what is that going to do?
Exactly. Or say they're quote unquote being crazy when they're really not.
Yeah. Exactly. It's going to add fuel to the fire. It makes it worse. It's because what you're doing is you're not validating their experience. You're making it you're trivializing the experience. You're making it sound so minor.
Right. Exactly. No, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Well, and the whole thing is being realistic with your emotions. Like, anxiety and depression are human conditions. And yes, we want to help, manage it and work with it, but to say to get rid of it completely altogether is impossible, because they're normal, traditional reactions.
So real quick, a question for you, though. Would you say a lot of actors deal with anxiety and depression more often than most people do?
I would say yes, because it is lonely. Okay. It's lonely. It can be lonely. I mean, yes, you may have, again, fans or other actors around you, but it can be lonely at times because nobody really understands. And also, what I've noticed, especially actors I work with, is sometimes their family and community isn't entirely supportive.
Yeah, no, I get that completely too. And you don't know who your real friends are a lot of times. So people are just
Hmm.
kind of like, oh, hey, how do I know I can trust these people and things like that?
Yeah. And unfortunately, I mean, acting, or I'm not acting. I've experienced where a lot of people find out who their true friends are in times of need, and then sometimes are in a bad way shocked, to a point where
Yeah,
they thought who their friend wasn't really there for them at all.
yeah. No, I get that completely too. Another notable person that we missed was, remember the Green Power Ranger, Jason David Frank?
Hmm.
Now he was an interesting character because he was always in the limelight, and it comes to the fact that he committed suicide. Is that it's like he had it all going for him. He's done all these different shows and all these different things, had all the spotlight to just say that he struggled badly. Now I'm not sure exactly what he was struggling with exactly, but it was just like it was shocking to hear because I think the last time they seen him was a Comic-Con before he ended up taking his own life, and it was crazy to see because he had all the
Hmm.
limelight, everything going for him, and it leads me to this point is that no matter how good you have it, it doesn't mean that you're not dealing with something that you can't handle.
Right, because all you're doing is you're seeing the external.
Yeah,
You're not seeing the
or you
internal.
seen the mask when you say he was putting on a mask for everybody else. He didn't want anybody else to know
Yeah,
what he dealt with. Naomi Judd was another one, by the way, too, that was noted for suicide as well after long battles of depression. She's
yeah.
probably yeah. So I mean, it's like all these people have these great things, but we don't understand how exactly what they're doing, dealing with on the inside, and it's hard. So like, is there some things that we're missing maybe that we need to be looking at that hey, listen, these are some things you should be watching out for some of these people.
Well, I think just having these conversations, and this needs to be done, especially early on in the even in the acting training.
Mm-hmm.
There should be some type of classes that deal with emotional, work with emotional control, and having these conversations, destigmatizing all of
Mm-hmm.
this is a big thing. Because it's not a sign of weakness; it's a sign of strength. As a matter of fact, if you can
Yeah.
admit that you're feeling this, so having those types of conversations, I think, is extremely important.
Yeah, definitely. And all those notable names, it just says the same thing that this is a conversation
Yeah,
needs to be had. We're losing too many people to suicide and things like that. And
yeah.
it's crazy. Like it shouldn't be
Eh,
like this.
but and even going back, this is going to really date, but the movie Wizard of Oz, Judy Garland, for instance, another tragic case. They were saying that really the filming of Wizard of Oz ruined her. She was only like 19, 20 when she filmed it,
Yeah.
and you know, and this was in the 1938, 1939. Um, and the stuff I heard like on set,
Yeah.
was horrific on that movie. And ever since then, she just went through cycles of alcoholism, and then eventually, you know, wound up indirectly killing herself because
Yeah.
of the alcoholism. But yet, and other people said you could see the loneliness in her.
Yeah, a lot of times you can see a lot of stuff, read people's emotions and things like that too. And that was funny because I ran into somebody recently the other day when I was on a trip out of town. You could see it. They were saying, "Oh, I'm all good," but you could look at if you watch their facial features, they'll say something and then they'll kind of change
Yeah,
like a little bit. You just got to watch for sudden little twitches of things that change, and it shows up
yeah,
in a lot of people that have DID as well. It's not so much a personality; it's just watch them, and you just watch these little out of the subtle changes they make and things like that. I interviewed
yeah.
somebody recently that had it, Albert, and it was interesting to see because I'm watching these things and I'm noticing the small little changes of things as the attitude, the demeanor, the things they say, the way they say it. All those things play in factor to that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, what you're saying, is kind of your micro expressions. It's like,
Yeah,
slight things like, like you could tell even, just look at the facial expressions. Like, a frown could appear in a half a second, but yet it's still a frown.
yeah,
Um, or sometimes when you could tell somebody's not being true to themselves, if they say like a statement, like they're agreeing with something, but yet their head is shaking, like the word no. Like they're
yeah.
saying no, but they're saying yes, or vice versa. It's like that can almost tell that you're not being entirely honest with yourself
Oh,
with
here you
saying
go.
that.
Okay, so Albert, here's a really good one now. Okay, everyone knows Dwayne Johnson, correct? But does everyone know
Yeah,
that Dwayne deals with depression?
that's I'm not surprised,
You know what I
at
mean?
all.
Like you wouldn't see it based on the personality, none of that. And I thought that was very interesting when I saw that too. I was like, really? That just says it's right there. He has everything. He has the career, he has the wrestling career, he has all these things going for him. And at the end of the day, he struggles too. And it brings it to reality that it's like even The Rock has issues, you know? Kristen Bell's another
Hmm.
one named on this. She has anxiety and depression she deals with. Carrie Fisher from, Sex and the City. Katy Perry's on this list. You know what I mean? It's just to say that all these people deal with these things, you know, and
100%. Yes.
it's so interesting to find out how many have it. That John Hamm is admitted to having depression. It says, particularly after the death of his father, which I mean, I can believe that makes sense. Wayne Brady's on this list too for clinical depression. You'd never know with Wayne Brady though. Like Wayne is always
Yeah.
so positive, upgoing. He's always funny. He's always making jokes. But he also does comedy too, and comedy is an interesting aspect too if you think about it. A lot of those guys go through a lot of struggles with that. They
Yeah.
bomb, and then you deal with all the people haggling them and things like that. Bert Kreischer's one of the notable ones that has anxiety. He talks about it all the time. He has really bad anxiety and things like that. But this guy goes out in front of all these people and does all the comedy and everything else, takes his shirt off, stuff like that. This guy is so vulnerable. And it's so cool to see, though, he's openly talking about these things, because I think like some of these guys, if they were more to talk about it, I think it'd be a little more, we'd probably get more noise to it. But, like I said, though, the whole reason this is here, this is what I'm doing now, is I'm trying to get this talked about enough. And I invite different people to come on here to do these things, especially somebody in your area where you work. That is just interesting in general to know, like all these different things. And we have your background alone is amazing because you can start to notice these signs ahead of time and try and help these guys where you can. Like, hey, listen, I'm starting to notice some things. Hey, you might want to work on a few. You know what I mean? Try and help these guys break that cycle that's been happening with these guys.
Yes, 100%. No, absolutely, and that's the important thing is to, try to intervene early so that we don't have more Robin Williams or Heath Ledgers,
Yeah.
on our hands. Or even another one is Philip Seymour Hoffman, who is a brilliant actor.
Oh my God, he was amazing. He was amazing.
Gone too soon.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we, more conversations need to be brought on this topic just overall.
Remember the Superman? I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but the one guy that played Superman that did it as well.
Yeah, Christopher Reeves. Yeah,
there you go. I could not think of Christopher Reeves' name for the life of me. I was like, God, man, that was a notable one too. When we were talking about it too, I was thinking, like, man, what is that guy's name? And Christopher Reeves is the one I'm thinking of too. He was Superman. Like everybody's idol to be Superman.
Yeah.
So it's just crazy though, man. It's just like and some of the unknown actors is the Never Ending Story kid. Jonathan Brandis, that was on. Oh man, dude, I remember him from my childhood, man. Like I love the Never Ending Story, things like that. What else is on this list? We got Richard Jenny. He stand-up comedian, actor in The Mask, died by ended up taking his life by a gun. He also dealt with severe depression and schizophrenia. Now that's an interesting one too.
Yes, absolutely. Because that is like the mind working against you. You think about it. And, with schizophrenia, that's a lifelong condition. And that, the only way to really manage that is through both therapy and medication.
Yeah.
And, the downside with that is while the medication may be effective, the side effects are often brutal. And that's why it's hard for people to stay compliant on, most antipsychotic and antidepressant medications. Or anti-anxiety, because the side effects are unpleasant.
Oh my God, yes. I tried some for my anxiety. It was the worst experience ever in my life. I will tell you that much right now. It's just it was horrible because I felt like I was having a heart attack. I'm standing there and my heart is racing so fast. It's like, oh yeah, I didn't like that feeling at all.
Yeah.
Another interesting one I just found was Nikki Cat. Now, if anybody doesn't remember who Nikki Cat was, he was in Dazed and Confused, Boiler Room, Sin City, Way the Gun, or some of the notable ones that he was for, and Nikki was, I love Nikki. Nikki was a great actor, though. I always thought he played a good role in certain areas that he did, and he had that kind of like that real serious demeanor, and he played that real good kind of villainous kind of role type thing. But he was another one, though, and I found out he hung himself. It's like, these guys, it's like the numbers are just going up, and it's just like, we got to stop something here, man. We got to stop now. We got to start having these conversations sooner. and start talking to people and, start noticing the signs that people are struggling with things. What are some things people should look out for, actually? How about that? That's a better question for you, because you've been able to give us a better answer to that one.
Well, I mean, it's hard because people are not going to talk about it. That's the issue. So I think, overall, just check in, with, how are you doing?
Yeah.
Not about the character. How are you doing? What I'm often worried about are the people that seem unfazed by things. Like the people that seem way too calm or too composed. Those are the ones I'm a little concerned about.
Yeah.
Because I feel like they may be putting up a front.
Yeah.
So check in with your friends, even, your friends that have it all together. And it's, there's no such thing as everyone should have it all together all the time.
Right. Exactly.
Those are people I'm concerned about. They're like the ones that have to be the rock, not the character, but I'm saying they're a metaphorical rock.
Yeah, no, I got you.
When they say that, I'm worried about those people. Because again, sometimes they're going to snap, and then unfortunately, when they snap, it could be tragic.
We don't want that to. Kind of like the Chris Benoit situation. Remember that one, Albert, where he just went completely berserk and ended up unfortunately taking everyone's life, including his own. It's things like that we just want to avoid. Or Junior. When Junior Seau was in the other notable one, he had some kind of issue where he just went kind of berserk, and they weren't really sure about him. That finally caused them to start looking at concussions in the NFL and things like that too. And it's unfortunate it got to that point.
Well, I mean, concussions are a real thing, especially traumatic brain injury, TBI, which is, really gonna, can not only just neurologically, or physically, but it can also mentally, have a drastic effect.
Yeah.
Too. I've watched interviews with people who've had TBI and who have said that they're now getting dark moods a lot, like depression or high levels of anxiety, because of the circuitry in the brain is off.
Yeah, because Chris Benoit had brain trauma, it says, from his time in the contact sports, from when he did the wrestling and things like that too. Yeah. That's what caused him eventually to do that too, which is very interesting to see, because it's like a lot of people didn't know anything back then about that. And it took these events to happen for us to finally do something about it and start looking more into these issues. Junior Seau, God forbid, that one too. He played football for all them years, and everybody's had concussions. Steve Young's had a history of concussions. He almost he had to retire because of concussions, because they were getting so bad.
Yeah.
And then most notable now is the Miami guy. What's his name? Tua. I can't even remember the rest of the guy's name. I know a butcher, but Tua, basically, he had a lot of too. He has a clause in his contract that for that same thing, exactly that, concussions, because with NFL and contact sports, those are the kind of things you're gonna run into. You guys are constantly taking shots to the head and all those rattles and things like that. And God forbid, Jim Carrey didn't do that either when he didn't have any really bad traumatic brain issue, but because he did all those stunts, like Me, Myself, and Irene, the part where he's fighting himself and he flips over that thing. There was a note that he'd actually done that himself, and I'm just like, oh God, Jim, why? I get you want the authenticity, but Jim, man, he was an interesting character in general. I loved watching him on, like his what was it? He did In Living Color for a while. That's when I first saw him. And then he had Ace Ventura, and then he did like The Number 23 was one of the more serious films he did, which I thought was really good, because you didn't see him do a lot of those. He always mostly did comedies and things like that. And the same notable thing for Robin Williams was when he did Patch Adams, was an amazing one too. And the seriousness of that film, and the unfortunateness that happened to the female role in that one, had going into that guy's house, there's having a lot of problems and things like that. Unfortunately, took her life and his own, and it's just crazy though, man. It's like all these people are going, man, and it's just like, we got to stop this now, like these conversations, like you said, we got to check in on these guys and see what's up. Even if they look like they have it all together, we need to check in on them. I think like having regular psychiatric exams for some of these actors may not be a bad idea for some of these guys, one of these long, deep roles, like, the Tom Hanks thing when he was doing Castaway, and like we mentioned before, his state of mind, like, I don't even know what that man was thinking after that, because he had to go through a lot. He had to lose a lot of weight and, things like that. A lot of guys have to lose a lot of weight, to gain a lot of weight. And even the people that do the impersonations, I think it was in the 90s, MTV was doing that show, Real Life. Remember the one with the Jenna Jameson, or whatever her name was? The girl that played the stunt double for her or whatever, we had to keep losing weight and gaining weight, buying these things and do all these. And it's just like the imagine the stress of that alone, trying to keep up with being that person.
and also stress on the body too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that's not normal. Losing all that weight so fast and gaining it so quick is not healthy for people at all.
Not at all, no.
And, and Elvis Presley was an interesting one, too, just to mention one that I've really just thought of, like if you really listen to his story, he was grooming, his wife, his soon-to-be wife, too. If you think about it, the way he was going about things, he just did some really weird things that people didn't know about until that documentary came out, and you really dug deep into it. And he did some, like, really bizarre things that you would never think. Like, Elvis never did that, and, like, the struggles he dealt with, too.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely.
And it's just crazy, honestly, man. Just to think of like all these people, like you hear these names and you're like, really? The Rock, he has depression? Yeah, The Rock deals with it. He talks about it, and I think it's interesting when you find out a lot of these guys deal with stuff, because I don't think mental health's talked about enough with a lot of people. A lot of people don't understand the complexity of how far this thing goes and how deep you go into these things. Is once you get past anxiety and depression, there's BPD, there's borderline personality disorder we can throw in there. It just gets real interesting how, that one and people deal with it. And it presents in people in every different way. So it's not always the same thing you're looking at too. And there's, I did interview with a guy that has schizophrenia, and it was interesting, but he didn't hallucinate, he said, but I know a lot of people think automatically with that. That's what you're starting to see,
No, and not everybody who's schizophrenic hallucinates.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, there's so many different ways that schizophrenia manifests itself.
Yeah.
But it's still, no matter what, it's definitely a torturous mental anguish. Yeah.
Especially people with BPD, I think they're the most interesting cases so far people have run across. I know I've run into some interesting cases in this podcast. Okay, so I did an interview with a woman. She has a condition which is called FND, which is functional neurological disorder. Okay, so what she told me is what she knows about it is it takes 15 to 20 years in the UK alone for it. So she was from, I think, England or something like that, somewhere over there in the European region. I know that much. I'm not sure exactly where she was. I think it was the UK. Don't quote me on it, or maybe England. But she said the way it works for her is that her hand will go into a claw form and it locks up when her anxiety picks up high enough, and she's stuck. It sticks like this. And I thought that was interesting, because there was another person that says that they have it, and they said that their condition is they go completely full body paralysis, and it's so interesting because it presents neurologically, but it isn't neurologically. That's the thing. They don't find it that way. And that's why it takes so long, which makes you wonder how many people actually suffer with these conditions that just don't know it because it takes so long to diagnose.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just crazy, honestly. So real quick, do you have anybody notable you can tell us that's in your career?
Yeah, up and coming. I don't really, I work with a lot of up and coming.
Yeah.
So, but
listen, nothing wrong with that. Really, you're doing great work, man. That's what matters. You're out there. You're identifying these things. You're making sure people are doing well. So, any notable clients you have that we might recognize?
I don't want to mention by name, but
there's something they've done. No, you don't mention.
Yeah, they were in Goodfellas, The Bronx Tale. I have a client who, was in both of those, years ago. So, and he had notable roles. So he's pretty much notable if you saw him.
Yeah.
I have a client who was, in the movie Hannibal, Lecter. He was also on, he had a major recurring role on Gotham, the Fox series.
Gotham was a fantastic show.
It really was. I do work with some, up and coming in that way. Like people you may recognize their face, but maybe not their name.
Yeah, no, that's understandable though. That's so cool to see though. I mean, that's awesome though, man. I really appreciate everything you're doing out there though. I really do.
Thank you.
Your background alone is amazing, because the fact that you can start identifying a lot of these issues ahead of time for these younger guys and these upcoming guys is really great. I think you're going to make a big impact on a lot of them, that we can try and start reducing that number somewhat, and things like that. So hats off to you for the background alone, man, because that had to take a lot of work just alone to get it all done.
Thank you.
So I think it's what you're doing is great. Like I said, it doesn't matter how big the client was. It's just great to see somebody's out there that can identify these issues and make the stronger statement that, these things are issues that we deal with. And, and identify these things. So, I appreciate you coming and everything else like that. It was really great having you. Did you want to plug your website or anything for anybody? You want to tell them where they can come find you if they want to?
Sure. You can find me at albertbramante.com. I also would like to plug my book.
Yeah, go ahead. Please do.
Yeah, Rise Above the Script, Confronting Self-Doubt and Mastering Self-Sabotage for Performing Artists. It's on Amazon. I have it available as paperback, ebook, as well as audiobook.
Do you want to cover a little bit what the book's about? We got a few minutes.
Sure. So as I was saying before earlier, how a lot of actors self-sabotage, and that's what it works. There's a lot of techniques in there to, first of all, explaining what actors self-sabotage, like personality traits and fear of success or imposter syndrome. And it's, even though it's geared towards actors, there's, stuff in there for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially when it comes to imposter syndrome and all that kind of stuff.
Just
little good tidbits in there, and I love it. That's great. That's awesome. That the book's there. I'm going to have to check it out for sure. Definitely.
Well, great. And feel free to reach out. I'm at Dr. Al Bramante on Instagram. Feel free to follow me and, DM me if, you want to have a chat. I'd be open to that.
There you go, guys. That's where you find them, guys. All those links will be down here below inside the chat section below this video. I have all that stuff written down. I got all his Instagrams and everything else, the website, all that great stuff for you. Albert, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate you being here, man. This has been a great conversation. I definitely, like I said, I'm definitely going to check out the book because I'm interested, because I do deal with imposter syndrome a lot of times myself with certain things, and it's something interesting I like to learn more about. And anytime I can learn anything new, honestly, I'm down for it. Why not? You can never learn too much, honestly, in this life.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Definitely, guys. Well, guys, I'm going to wrap up this episode of Pete vs. Anxiety. Once again, Albert, thank you so much for being here. Guys, you know where to find me. I'm Pete vs. Anxiety on X, all the way down to TikTok. I'm on Spotify, all down our radio. And as I always say, it costs nothing, absolutely nothing. Be kind to somebody. One kind act you could do could save someone's life, or hell, you can make their day. I'm Pete vs. Anxiety, saying, hey, don't ask your day is today. Ask, hey, how's your mental health today?